Hey, what's up, everybody? We're doing a nice little podcast. I'm inviting my cousin on here to just go ahead and mix it up, have a good conversation. And it's about the Bible. My cousin's a minister, and I kind of wanted to have a conversation with him about what the Bible says about the logo, about what the Bible says. Well, he's here in a second, so we'll go ahead and talk to him. Hey, what's up?
Hey, I'm back. Yeah, I'm
So,
here.
so that was a test. I want to start it a little different this time, but still in the same realm. So I want you to go ahead and tell me a little about the Adam and Eve story
Okay.
from that realm, and where we're leading back to is the Apple logo. And I want to tell us, like, sometimes I believe God hides things in plain sight, and I want to kind of like think about what things are going on and think, is this Armageddon? Is this the end of times? Or, but first, let's start with Adam and Eve story of,
No.
because it's the bite taken out of the apple, and it might be because it was Macintosh. It might be because Steve Jobs liked apples. It might be that it was just a coincidence, or it might be that there was a satanic start to technology and a lot of these things. So start with the Adam and Eve story.
Okay. Okay. So the Adam and Eve story really begins in Genesis chapter 2. Well, it begins in Genesis chapter 1. We see the creation of man. That is explained in a little bit more detail in Genesis chapter 2. But Genesis chapter 3 is where everything changes, because that is where we have what historically in theological discussions and understanding of biblical interpretation is called the fall of humanity. Okay, so Adam and Eve are put in the Garden of Eden, placed there by God in this pristine environment for them to live and be to procreate and to have a life on this earth that God has created. But God did give them a stipulation. God gave them a lot of things to enjoy, but He also gave them a prohibition, and that is that they should not eat of the fruit of good and evil. Okay, and through the temptation of the serpent, starting first with Eve and then to Adam, they disobey that commandment by eating what we call the forbidden fruit, because God put a prohibition on that. And so they chose to disobey that one prohibition that God had given to them. As you read Genesis chapter 2 and Genesis chapter 3, there were many things that God allowed Adam and Eve to do. But it's interesting that it was the one thing that He said they could not do, uh, that became a problem. And by choosing to disobey Him, then they were expelled from the garden. And so that is where, I guess, the forbidden fruit, or the apple, plays that role.
So that was the fall. That was the fall of. Sorry, the fall of man was before that. But was that also the fall of man? And did God expect, because we're created in His image, and He knows us like He knows the hair on our head?
Mhm.
Does He did He have some sort of intent to create what we have? Was it in divine order, or was it like free will, or was it a decision that needed to be made?
Okay. Well, the fall takes place specifically in Genesis chapter 3, right? It's all with this eating of the fruit, with this willful violation of the command of God. Now, it is true that God knows everything, okay, and God, in his knowledge, right? We can't say, well, God knows everything that is going to happen, all right? But just because God knows that something is going to happen, it does not mean that He does not will the best. And by that I mean, yeah, if God knows that somebody is I guess, might not live a good life, then does that mean that that person should not have a life at all? Okay. So just because God knows that something is going to go wrong, there are many things that went right with Adam and Eve. Okay. The family, obviously, that they were able to start, and we believe that they were the beginning of the human race. All right. So there was a lot of good that happened. The issue of free will, obviously, is one that is clearly a very important part of our relationship with God, okay? Because it means something to God that we are going to serve Him of our own free will, because we choose to do it, not because there is any influence that He is going to exert over us. That is, well, if you don't serve me, I'm going to take all the oxygen from out of the atmosphere. All right. In his design of us, as He created us, there was that variable in our creation, that even though God gave us this life, God nonetheless allows us to reject Him. Now, this is something that as we look at with God, it is a very fundamental part of our own relationships as well. Okay? The fact that someone chooses to love us because they want to love us, those become our most meaningful relationships. Anytime we're in a relationship where we have a suspicion that somebody engages with us or communicates with us for some benefit that we give them other than just our presence, there is always that line of distrust, the line of questioning. There is never a depth of intimacy to the relationship, because we know that person has ulterior motives. It is not it is not of a free it's not a freely given devotion without any condition. All right. And so those relationships become the most powerful in our life. And that is the same thing with our relationship with God.
Do you believe in unconditional love?
Yeah, I do believe in unconditional love. Well, first of all, because it's taught in the Bible, so it's
Yeah.
obviously it can be done. The what we have to understand about unconditional love is that when it comes to the human expression of it, okay, uh, we we can't do it all the time, and that's one of the things we have to understand, right? That even though we're commanded to love, and that word that is used in the Bible, that Greek word for unconditional love, used so many times, how God loved the world unconditionally, how we are supposed to love Him unconditionally. Uh, it is not something that is always consistent in our lives, right? We could be going through a very distressing time, and somebody needs something from us, but because we're focused on our own needs and our own frustrations, we can't choose to do that. But there is the sense in which that we can have a commitment to someone. It doesn't matter what it is that they have done, right? Just for no other reason than we have chosen to love that person. And unconditional love, one thing that we have to understand is not, we can't always just think about this as some kind of emotional expression, or some kind of, emotional interaction that we are feeling, right? I mean, when you come down to it, love is basically, your willingness to sacrifice your own desires and needs for the benefit of someone else. And that is what we see. I mean, you don't have to feel that. I'm sure there were many times my mother didn't feel like doing a lot of things for me when I was growing up, or my father, right? But because I was their son, and because they had to provide for me and they wanted the best for me, they might not have had the positive emotion with it, but it was a commitment that they made, and that is how we have to see that, right?
Okay. Even though we haven't identified whether it's true or not, let's
Hmm.
assume that the fruit, the apple, came from the Adam and Eve story. And then it's provided a lot of good and bad, and technology is pushing a lot of things, like like a lot of the younger children are being babysat by computers and technology. Um, there's and I'm more liberal than you, but there's lots of pornography that's on, and a lot of younger people are getting to see that pornography way before, and things that even though your mind isn't fully developed, you're always growing, but your mind isn't fully developed until age 25. There's lots of different things. You're less apt to get a lot of things that church pushes for, less apt to get married, less apt to do a lot of things if you have that quick stimulus and response that you can just go and watch pornography. It's like harder to go approach somebody and stick to it and be balanced long enough to actually create a relationship, because you always have that quick, your needs are met really quick. And we can both agree that it's not the essence of that powerful connection, but it's one of those things that we just were operating out of our brain. It connects us like really quick to something. So if you look at a lot of things that are going on in the world, can you think that could possibly be true, that technology is the forbidden fruit? We're going to be more concept than reality here.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I would not think that, simply because technology is something that, well, can I say that is assumed, that in the Bible it is assumed that humanity is going to be technologically inclined and engaged. Let me put it that way. In the beginning of creation, right, in Genesis chapter 1, when it is talking about when God is creating the heavens, okay, and he creates the stars and the sun, moon, and all this, right? And as these verses are recorded, it says this, right, that the stars and the moon and the sun, these things have been put in place, okay, so that humanity can use them for days and for times and for seasons. Okay? Now that statement is done at a time when nobody has an observatory, or nobody has a telescope. But nonetheless, this thing is put in place that God knows that humanity, they're going to be able to look up into the skies, and they're going to be able to see the movement of the celestial bodies, and they're going to know, if we follow these, we can mark these, and these can mark or seasons, as whether it's our farming or travels or whatever like that. Adam and Eve are told, well, Adam particularly is told that he is supposed to work the garden. He's not going to be doing that with just his hands and his fingers.
So,
right?
So is that before or after he ate the apple?
This is before.
Okay.
So this is before. So that's what I'm saying, is that there is this assumption that technology is going to be part. Now, here's how we have to view technology, though. Okay, we just can't see technology in a sense that, well, an iPhone or a mobile device. Okay, if we're looking at this from let's say from a Christian perspective, we're gonna look at this as how God has established our move-ins and our interactions. Okay, and so technology now really, there was one time I heard a definition, and I was trying to remember it to write it down, and I don't think I got this right, but it was, I heard this one. It's a very simple definition, and it says that technology is the invention of useful things to solve problems. Okay, I can't really tell you who I heard it, so it's not original with me. Okay,
Yeah.
but that is the key right there. All right, whereby man begins to use his environment to help him solve problems. Now, it is after the fall, okay, after Adam and Eve eat of the apple, and after we start reading about the generations that are coming after them, that we start seeing the inventions of things. We see the inventions of musical instruments, the inventions of tools to work metals. Okay, we also see the use of animals. So man has figured out how to domesticate animals, and that is also a technology. Okay, so man has this idea of technology is embedded within within the human race. It helps the human race to function and to grow and to advance, right? All forms of technology. Now, of which, when we start coming out to the computer technology, this is just part of the advancement of our humanity. We have just become more advanced in the tools that we are designing. There was one time when you could just shape a stick and dig in the ground with it, and that would have been enough. That would have been groundbreaking in the time of Adam, okay? But now, in the time in which we live, where there's the need for much greater farming practices and different learning how to farm in different parts of the world, the technology has improved, all right, and it has advanced, and that is how we have to see this. Everything can be used for good or for bad, all right. Now, let me tie that back now to the forbidden fruit, okay, because that forbidden fruit is called the fruit of good and evil, good and evil. It's not called
I heard you say
the
that earlier. I heard you say
right.
that earlier. I had never heard that
Yeah,
until
yeah.
earlier.
That's in Genesis chapter 2.
Yeah.
All right. So it's of the
I
fruit
just
of
read up
good
to
and evil.
Genesis chapter 1. I didn't make it to chapter 2.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, yeah. There's a lot more then. Okay. So it's called the fruit of good and evil, right? It
Yeah,
has
yeah.
it has these two. The one name really has two it's on two sides of the spectrum. You have good and evil existing at once, because the fruit, okay, the fruit is a testament to the obedience of Adam and Eve. As long as Adam and Eve don't touch that fruit, it is going to be the fruit of good. The moment that they eat of it, it becomes evil. All right. So the fruit of the misquoted that there is the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. That's right.
Okay,
Okay.
the knowledge of
So
good and
that's the
evil.
name of it. The tree it's a fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. Okay.
Okay.
So the fruit embeds within it the knowledge of both. As long as they don't touch the fruit is good. The moment that they eat of it, the fruit becomes bad.
See,
Okay. Before it becomes evil.
it's interesting because that changes the story. I mean, just a little part of the story for me, because I
Mm-hmm.
always thought it was the tree of knowledge. And then I always wondered why God didn't want them to go to the tree of knowledge, but it's the tree of
All right. The tree
good
of
knowledge, good
knowledge of good and
and
evil.
evil. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot more sense.
Right. So that's why. So now, and that brings us as a good, right? So when it comes to technology now, I mean, that's basically the same thing, right? Technology could be as good as we want it to be, or it can influence some of the greatest evil there is in our hearts. It can promote that, and it can amplify it to a degree that it hurts a tremendous amount of people at the greatest speed and with the greatest intensity that no one has ever known.
So I wanted to kind of so I kind of look at this as we have these a lot of people are focused on a lot of things right now, but they might be focused on race, and they might say all the people of one race are bad, or and they're saying their race is good. But what it comes down for me is we got to focus on whether they're being good or bad. Most people are being neutral, and we got to look for evil where it is. Evil's not going to look like a race. Evil's not going to look like wearing a suit. Evil's not going to be whatever thing. We have to like look what fruit they're bearing. The
Mm-hmm.
fruit that the person is manifesting, and sometimes it's hard, but also we shouldn't get caught up in oh, that person's the same race as me. They went to the same college. They must be a good person.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we have an opportunity to learn from all God's creatures.
Yes, and I guess when it comes to and this idea of what we look for in individuals, I guess we can be like that in terms of not just necessarily race, but it also kind of goes even to like philosophies and to beliefs, whether that's political or that's cultural. And it is true. Sometimes, we do look to the things that make us feel comfortable, to give us some security. And so it is appealing to us to be part of a group that believes as we believe, because there's no threat in that. All right, there's no discomfort in that. There's tremendous amount of security that you have when you are around people who believe what you believe, even if what you believe is wrong. One of the hardest things, though, I think, and that we have to be very careful of, is sometimes that the definition of good and evil or right or wrong can sometimes vary depending on where you are, right? And I'm so there's some people who can think, and this is just drawing an example, they can think that just because you are, let's say, a Democrat, then there is something morally bankrupt about your life. You see, now that is a statement on good and evil. That's an ethical judgment that they're making on you simply because of your political affiliation. Okay, and I think that that's probably one of the hardest things, that sometimes we have to be very careful of. That just because we support something, or just because something is, let's say, meaningful to us, we have to be very careful how we see the opposite of it, all right? And the moral classifications or judgments that we're going to put on that. Just because somebody might believe different than I am, okay? If somebody might not necessarily believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, okay? But does that belief all of a sudden make them a morally bankrupt person? Right? Does this person all of a sudden know? Is there no good that this person can do? Can there not be a moral stance that they want to take on something in society? And so we have to be very careful how we're going to place like a designation, specifically moral designations, on what is right and what is wrong. There are a lot of things I'm sure you probably can look back on in your life. I can certainly look back on my life, and there were things that I felt this was wrong. Okay, I would not have done it. But no, a lot of that was culturally, I guess, influenced or formed within me. The society that I was a part of, the upbringing that I had. But now, as you look at those situations, I mean, can you say that it might not have been the best situation, maybe, right? Or it could have just been that somebody chose a different path in life, and it was not necessarily that this thing was right or this thing was wrong. And so, yeah, I think sometimes that causes us, right, when we.
We'll get Terry back on here. He's sharing some very good information. I'm gonna let him continue, and then I'm gonna ask him about Armageddon. Terry, jump back on. So Terry doesn't pop on here in a little while. We're gonna go part. We're gonna do this as part one, and then do another part two. I think a lot of the stuff that he was talking about is judgment, um, because there's a lot of that going on. People are, and it's the thing. If you have one finger pointing this way, you have three fingers pointing back at yourself. A lot of people are too busy judging others based on their beliefs, but they're not aligned with their own beliefs. So it's so much easier to question others than to build yourself up, make sure that you're congruent and strong in your own beliefs. And it's a lot harder than just judging other people. So I believe in this time going to the pendulum. We have Christian, non-Christian, gay, straight. We have so many different nooks and crannies of different belief systems and ideologies. I remember I have a "Make America Great Again" hat that I used at a Comic-Con International in San Diego. I was Bob Marley undercover at Comic-Con wearing the "Make America Great Again" hat. And during this time, before that, I put on the hat in my house, and my roommate wanted to get in a fight with me, even though he knew that I wasn't. I don't support either side, but he knew I wasn't a Trump supporter. But that red hat triggered him. So I don't know if you heard the part, but I was talking about kind of going on what you were talking about judgment
Okay.
earlier. And in 2011, I was Bob Marley undercover at Comic-Con wearing a "Make America Great Again" hat. And before that, or around that time, I put it on, and my roommate wanted to hit me.
Okay.
And this is a guy we got along. He's a Marine, and he
Oh.
just like all of a sudden got triggered by that hat.
Yeah.
Like it was like it was a bull. Well, I always thought that bulls responded to red, but what they do is they respond to the movement of the cape. I found that out recently.
Okay. All right.
So that signaled something in him that he may have naturally had a certain feeling about it, but I feel the media pushed that hat even more and made it even more divisive, even though there was a lot of things that were real that anybody could have responded to, but they took it to another level. So sometimes there's so many avenues with media and the politicians and the politicians, by getting you sucked up to a certain point and then you wanting to believe in them, you're giving your power away to them. And a lot of people get lost in that, and that's happening online. And the reason we're bringing it into it, a lot of people are going to evil and not talking to their friends or different people just because they support Trump in some way. And they could be supporting Trump in a way that's positive because they feel Republicans are better for their kids. They have to have those certain beliefs in order to be sustainable at the job that they work at. So there's many things that go into that avenue. So you can touch on more of the stuff that you're talking about of judgment before you got cut off, or we can kind of go into a question of like, do you think that right now is end times?
Well, I think we can just stick with we could just pick it up from here. When it
Okay.
comes to the end times, the end times have been going on, I think, for a long time, right? The Bible tells us about the last days, even back in the Old Testament, and even the New Testament writers, Paul, even Peter, they had this idea that they were living in the last times. Okay. The issue of prophecy can be very, at least when it comes to, let's say, biblical interpretation, right? That sometimes that can be very historically biased. Is like sometimes people feel that the advancement that they're seeing in their time is really predictive of this is what it's going to be like when Armageddon hits, or these are going to be the last days. Okay, so a good example of this is back in the 70s. I remember hearing a preacher Yeah, he's preaching, but from the book of Revelation. And there's this statement in the book of Revelation that it says about that when Jesus returns, that every eye is going to see him. All eyes are going to see him when he comes back. And this was so his interpretation of this is that we are now on the cusp of this happening. In fact, our technology is there right now. And his interpretation was because of satellite television.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So he figures because we have, that now through the satellite technology, there can be these live broadcasts on our TVs. So for him, that was the marker of, well, we're living in the last days, because now we can see live events happening all over the world. All right. Now he had no concept whatsoever that there was going to come a time when, forget about satellite TVs, we're going to have mobile devices, right, in our hands. Now I can say that as living in this time, saying, well, all of us, we have mobile phones, but not everybody in the world has that. Okay. And I'm just drawing this as a reference. It could be that in the next 5 to 10 years, just about everyone, they're going to have implants. Forget about mobile phones, right? And then maybe in 15 years, there's going to be a completely new technology that none of us have heard of right now, that all of us are going to be using, or whoever is going to be using in 15 years. All right. So we got to be very careful when we start looking at these individual things to somehow say, well, now we have this entrance into the last days. In reality, not just in the book of Revelation, okay, but even in the books that are very prophetic, that have a lot of references to things that are going to happen in the future. It is never just one thing that is the one open door that signals this is what is going to happen.
Got it.
Okay, there are a multiplicity of things that have to be in place before we start saying, well, it looks like this is it. We might as well hold on to our hats because it's happening right about now. If there's one thing that Jesus even told his disciples, right, is that nobody knows the day or the time. And he said that because he wanted them to focus on what was a priority, not keeping their nose in the ear, looking to heaven, hoping that Jesus is going to come back, but that they would keep their eyes on the ministry that was before them and minister to people and share his word.
So I think it's very, very important, and then we'll get Terry on here one more time, and then we're gonna finish it up. Get back on here, cuz. So I think it's really important that we look at um, this technology and how we're pushing at it. I have this cup that's from this one local coffee shop, and these cups they've also bought some cheap cups, and this happened before, and they're leaking, and it's kind of annoying. But all of a sudden, I'm posting this on, and people can see all over the world that the living room coffee shop has bad cups right now. But the I'm gonna say the Catholic Church, not necessarily the all Christians, but the porn embraced the internet right away. They got on there, they're sharing their videos for a long period of time. After YouTube had been around for a while, that's when the Catholic Church officially got on YouTube, because there's lots of resistance to a lot of things, and I think it's important that, as my cousin was saying, that we don't say anything's necessarily good or evil. It's these are vehicles, and how we're going to push them, and the fruits that they bear are very important. Like you said in the Bible, of the tree of knowledge is the tree of good or evil is a good way good way of looking at it, because that puts us in a place to be able to go either way on that. Hey, what's up? So
Okay, I'm
we're
back.
gonna finish up here in a second, and I'm
Okay.
gonna definitely give you the last word. I'm gonna kind of talk to you what I was saying, and how once the internet came together and video was at a certain level, and even images, the porn industry like really went into it. Catholic, after YouTube was around for a while, then the Catholic Church, and I know that's not the church that you're aligned with, they were kind of late comers, because sometimes churches and a lot of organizations might think that something's like inherently evil, so they kind of stay away from it, or they're thinking that they can't necessarily fill up their church if they're putting all their services on there. People will just be watching, and they're not necessarily going to know who's watching. There's lots of things going into that situation. So I was talking about this cup from this coffee shop, and it's like leaking, and the fact that I could share something like that all over the world, like, let's try and share more good in our own way, like more good, and get out of the way as much as we can to let God work through us. And it's a different, my relationship with God is different than the relationship with God, but like letting God work through us in order to share what is impactful and positive and can help more people to do more good. So go ahead and finish off. You have up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, well, just in all the discussions on technology, I think that, God has provided a tremendous amount of diversity in this world for us to enjoy, but then also for us to use. And you are correct. When it comes to the church and when it comes to technology and what happens within our world, especially from the scientific aspect of it, the church has always been a little bit, wanted to stand off and condemn it at first, but then they see the benefits of it, and then they slowly incorporate it into what it is that they have done. I've heard one of the things about I've heard a commentator say this about COVID and churches, is that once we had all those lockdowns, COVID forced churches to catch up on 10 years of technology in a matter of months. And it ended up being a good thing for them, because they could not minister to their congregations any other way. I think that we just got to be thankful that we actually got to the party, and don't focus on the fact that we were late.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because I think everything's right time. Early on, I could be right or wrong. I called, like, we're talking early on. I mean, in March, whenever it stopped days in, I was thinking of COVID as a modern day Noah's Ark.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have any more necessary evidence from that, but I kind of feel that there was some we're not driving as much, not messing up the environment as much. A lot of people that didn't necessarily have time to spend with their family all of a sudden had more time to spend with their family. There's a lot of different things that got refreshed. There's a lot of bad things that happened also, and I think that was man's response to a lot of things that could have been embraced a little better.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those things could have been avoidable. So go
All
ahead.
right, and yeah, I guess as we're confronted with these situations, we try to make the best of them. And with any new situation that is going to be prolonged, like, the lockdowns were with COVID, it took everyone a long time to be able to figure out, well, how do I now function in this new environment, these restrictions? And it was difficult at first. We had that disorientation. People weren't sure what to do, how to interact. There was all these conflicting reports coming out, various informations being shared that said one thing one day and then another. So it was a little frustrating. But I guess even then, technology helped us as we slowly we started to find our balance, and voices became harmonized to some degree. Voices, started to form in their particular groups, but that's the way how humanity works. We tend to coalesce around the things that we have a bias for or an appreciation for. And so I guess in all of this, technology is something that I think, there's good and bad in all of it. As you mentioned, with the pornography, not just pornography, but cyber attacks, the spread of disinformation, misinformation. These things happen. So people can use whatever there is for good or for evil. But just like you said, it ultimately comes down to the decisions that we're going to make in our life, right? Because at the end of the day, I don't believe God is going to hold me accountable for the way that you chose to live your life or the things that you did. It's ultimately, what did I do
That'd
with
be
the
very convenient for me.
yeah. Yeah. That'd be a challenge for the rest of us. Yeah. But it's ultimately, what do we do with the time that we're given, the resources that we had, and the opportunities that were made available to us? And did we use them for the glory of what God is doing in our life and for the purposes He designed us for? Or did we choose to act selfishly and just use these things for our own benefit at the expense of others? All right. So just as you make the decisions that you face each day, it's all about, what good can I bring with the time that I've been given and the opportunities that I have and the resources that I've been given, that I can glorify God with the purpose that He has designed me to have in this life that He has given to me.
That's very beautiful. That's a perfect ending. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank
Until
you.
next time.
All right. You take care.
Peace.